now, a revolution in civilization is taking place. Imagine a traditional city and consolidating its footprint, designing to protect and enhance nature. The line will be home to 9 million residents and will be built with a footprint of just 34 square kilometers.
You're looking at what might be the most ambitious construction project in human history. A city 170 kilometers long, 500 meters tall, wrapped in mirror glass, designed to house 9 million people. Saudi Arabia calls it the line. But here's what they're not telling you. This $8 trillion megastructure might already be doomed. I'm going to show you exactly why this could fail, what they're hiding, and what happens when a country tries to build a perfect city from scratch. Let me put this in perspective. If you stacked every floor of Taipei 101, one of the world's tallest buildings, end to end, you'd need to do it over 300 times to match the line's length. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman unveiled this project as the centerpiece of Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia's plan to pivot away from oil dependency. The country knows fossil fuel demand is declining, so they need a new identity. They need tourism, technology, services, basically anything but oil. And they're betting $8 trillion on a single project to make it happen. Think about that number for a second. $8 trillion. But here's where it gets interesting. Urban sprawl destroys cities. We all know this. You wake up, commute for an hour, work, commute back, and your day is gone. Cities like Los Angeles sprawl for miles, forcing people into cars, creating pollution, wasting time.
Residents have access to all their daily needs within 5-minute walk neighborhoods. And the line's infrastructure makes it possible to travel end to end in 20 minutes with no need for cars.
The line promises to solve it. Their pitch: stack everything vertically. Make the city so narrow that you're never more than a 5-minute walk from nature on either side. Create what they call a 15-minute city, where everything you need is accessible within a quarter hour. Amsterdam does this reasonably well. Paris has areas that work like this. But the line wants to take it to the extreme. And here's their solution for getting around: a high-speed rail system they call the spine. According to their promotional materials, you can travel the entire 170 kilometers in just 20 minutes. Sounds perfect, right? Wrong. The math doesn't work. Let's do some basic physics. To cover 170 kilometers in 20 minutes, you need an average speed of 510 kilometers per hour. That's faster than most commercial trains on Earth. But that's just average speed. To achieve that average with stops, you'd need maximum speeds approaching 700 kilometers per hour. Even if we accept they could build a train that fast, and that's a massive if, they're not accounting for stops. 9 million people live in this city. How many stations do you need? Where do you put them? Every time that train stops, it has to decelerate from insane speeds and then accelerate back. The energy requirements alone would be huge. Even worse, the G-forces on passengers during those accelerations would be uncomfortable at best, dangerous at worst. And if you're making even a dozen stops along that 170-kilometer route, your 20-minute journey time explodes to over an hour. But wait, there's more. Most people won't be traveling the full length. They need to move between floors, between neighborhoods, between districts. The line's solution? A complex system of vertical transportation. Think of it like Shanghai Tower's stacked zones and sky lobbies, but for an entire city. Picture this. You live on floor 340, section B, about 80 kilometers from one end. You need to get to a doctor's appointment on floor 150, section G, 30 kilometers away. You take an elevator down to your local sky lobby, wait for a horizontal shuttle, transfer to the spine, ride for several stops, transfer again, take another elevator up. That 15-minute city promise, it just became 45 minutes of transfers and waiting. Here's something the promotional videos don't show you. The line is 500 meters tall and only 200 meters wide. The upper floors will be bathed in desert sunlight. Beautiful views, natural light, fresh air. But as you go down, each floor casts a shadow on the ones below. By the time you're at floor 100, you're living in permanent darkness. By floor 50, you might see direct sunlight for an hour a day. Maybe. The lower you live, the darker your world becomes. And in a city where real estate is everything, where location determines quality of life, this creates an immediate hierarchy. The wealthy live at the top, in light. The poor live at the bottom, in shadow. The line, designed to eliminate inequality, builds it into the literal structure. The promotional materials talk about equality and access for all, But architecture doesn't lie. When you create physical conditions where upper floors are objectively better than lower floors, you create a class system. It's inevitable. But natural light is just the beginning of environmental problems. The line's exterior is covered in mirrored glass, floor to ceiling, top to bottom, 170 kilometers of reflective surface. The promotional materials show this as futuristic and beautiful. What they don't show you is what happens to birds. Every year, billions of birds migrate across the Arabian Peninsula. They've followed these routes for millennia. Now, imagine a 500-meter tall mirror wall suddenly appearing across their path. They can't see it. The reflection looks like open sky, like continuation of their route. They fly straight into it. At the speeds migratory birds travel, collision with glass is fatal. We're not talking about dozens of birds. We're talking about potentially millions. Every migration season, the line could become a 170-kilometer death trap for wildlife. And it's not just birds. Ground animals have migration patterns too. Gazelles, oryx, desert foxes, their routes will be severed. The line cuts across multiple ecosystems, creating an impenetrable barrier that fragments habitats and isolates populations. Ecologists call this kind of structure a barrier effect. It doesn't just kill individual animals. It breaks apart populations, prevents genetic mixing, cuts off access to seasonal resources. Over time, animal populations on one side of the line could genetically diverge from those on the other side. Some smaller populations might disappear entirely, but the environmental damage goes deeper. Mirror glass reflects heat. In the desert, where ground temperatures already exceed 50 degrees Celsius in summer, a 170-kilometer mirror wall will intensify that heat at ground level. The area immediately around the line could become uninhabitable, temperatures soaring even higher than the surrounding desert. They promise the outdoor spaces won't be air-conditioned, but step outside at ground level in summer, and you're stepping into an oven. And then there's the carbon footprint of construction. To build the line, Saudi Arabia needs to produce more concrete than most countries use in a decade. The concrete industry is one of the largest sources of carbon emissions on Earth. Every ton of cement releases nearly a ton of carbon dioxide. The line will require hundreds of millions of tons. The construction phase alone will emit more carbon than many small countries produce in a year. And this is before we talk about operational emissions. They're driving 16,000 foundation piles into bedrock, each one requiring massive amounts of concrete and steel. They're building what amounts to thousands of skyscrapers connected into one continuous structure. The material requirements are beyond anything humanity has attempted. 9 million people living in a desert megastructure, in a place where summer temperatures reach deadly levels. Every single interior space needs cooling. The energy requirements are beyond comprehension. Even with solar panels covering every available surface, the line would struggle to generate enough power. They'll need massive external power plants, probably fossil fuel-based, at least initially. So much for carbon neutrality. And water in the desert. The line's solution is desalination. They're building what they claim will be the world's largest desalination plant. But desalination is incredibly energy intensive, and the current plant isn't even finished. Scaling up to provide water for 9 million people means scaling up energy consumption even further. Think about this. Every shower, every toilet flush, every glass of drinking water, every drop used for cleaning or cooking, all of it needs to be pulled from the ocean, stripped of salt using enormous amounts of energy, then pumped potentially hundreds of kilometers and hundreds of meters vertically. But maybe the biggest problem isn't environmental, it's philosophical. The line represents total control, every element of city life engineered from scratch. It's a city designed by algorithms, managed by AI, optimized for efficiency. And that sounds appealing, doesn't it? No traffic jams, slums, or messy human chaos. But here's what that really means. Someone controls every aspect of your life. What happens when those in control decide to tighten the rules? What happens when the AI management system prioritizes efficiency over freedom? You see, cities need chaos. Real cities are messy. They have humanity. The line eliminates all of that. Everything is planned. And in doing so, it eliminates the very chaos that makes cities livable, creative, and culturally rich. Think about the greatest cities on Earth. Paris grew organically over 2,000 years. New York is a collision of immigrant communities, each adding their flavor. Tokyo is organized chaos, dense beyond belief, but alive with human energy. Now, let's talk about what's actually being built. Because the full 170-kilometer line, that's not happening anytime soon. Maybe not ever. Phase 1 is a 2.4-kilometer section, not even 2% of the total project. And even that is proving pretty difficult. They're driving 16,000 foundation piles up to 70 meters deep into desert bedrock and pouring millions of cubic meters of concrete. The logistics are a nightmare. Saudi Arabia doesn't have the construction capacity for this. They're importing everything from materials, equipment, expertise, and labor. And that creates another problem. Concrete production alone is a huge problem. They need to produce it faster than it's ever been produced anywhere. The construction timeline assumes perfect conditions, perfect coordination, and perfect execution. In reality, construction projects this complex face constant delays, cost overruns, and technical challenges. Reports from the line construction site paint a disturbing picture. Workers living in cramped conditions, passports confiscated, wages withheld, and deaths from heat and accidents that go unreported. There have even been allegations of modern-day slavery. NEOM, the company behind the line, denies all of this. They point to labor agreements and safety standards, but they also refuse most press access. And then there are the people who already live there. The line's route crosses land where indigenous communities have lived for generations. Reports have hinted at people relocated against their will. The Huaytat tribe, who have lived in the region for centuries, reportedly faced eviction to make way for NEOM projects. Some resisted and were arrested. At least one was allegedly killed for refusing to leave his ancestral land. This raises uncomfortable questions. If a project requires forced displacement and exploitative labor practices just to get started, what does that say about the vision it represents? The line needs $8 trillion. Saudi Arabia has committed significant funds, but they can't finance this alone. They need private investment, lots of it. That's why Phase 1 focuses on anchor assets or simply flashy projects that look good in presentations. Say a man-made marina, a stadium and luxury residences for early adopters willing to take the risk. These assets serve two purposes: attract more investment and prove the line is real. But here's the catch. These are the easy parts. Building a marina for rich tourists is nothing compared to creating functional, high-density housing for millions. The anchor assets might get finished. The full city? That's a much bigger question. Investors are starting to ask harder questions. Where's the business model? Who's going to live here? What jobs will people do? Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has set 2026 as a crucial milestone, and right now, they have less than 3% of the total length under construction. The math doesn't look good. If 2026 goes and the line is still mostly desert and construction equipment, investor confidence will collapse. Already there are signs of scaling back expectations. Official statements have become more vague about timelines. The focus has shifted to Phase 1. But let's say they solve the money problem. Let's say construction accelerates. There's still a fundamental flaw. Linear cities don't work. Cities evolved as radial structures for good reason. From a central point, you can travel outward in any direction. Distance from center determines land value and density. This creates natural gradients of development and allows organic growth. A linear city has no center, or rather, it has 170 kilometers of center, which means it has no center at all. And transportation in a linear city is inherently inefficient. In a radial city, you can reach any point through multiple routes. In a linear city, there's essentially one route along the line. Every trip requires traveling along the spine. Imagine rush hour in a linear city. Everyone traveling in the same direction, using the same transport system, with no alternatives. Here's what bothers me most about the line. It's being built in a country with minimal democratic oversight, with a legal system based on religious law, with strict social controls, with a government that has been documented suppressing dissent. What happens when you disagree with how the city operates? Where do you protest? How do you organize? What rights do you have when the government controls not just the laws, but the literal architecture of your entire life? In a normal city, you can move to a different neighborhood. You can find communities that share your values. You have options. In the line, you're trapped in someone else's vision of perfect society. And if that vision includes surveillance cameras in every corridor, AI monitoring every movement, rules about what you can wear or say or believe, what then? The line could become the world's largest prison. Think about it. A city where your movement is tracked by the transport system, your purchases monitored by centralized payment systems, your communications flowing through government-controlled networks, your neighbors vetted and approved. A city where dissent can be identified and isolated instantly, where there's no escape because the desert surrounds you through and the exits are controlled. Let's be honest about what the line really is: a massive branding exercise. Saudi Arabia wants to change its image. They want to be seen as futuristic, innovative, forward-thinking. They want to be the next Dubai, but bigger, bolder, more audacious. Dubai transformed itself with iconic architecture: the Burj Khalifa, the Palm Islands, the indoor ski slope. These weren't just buildings, they were statements. They said, look what we can do. Look how ambitious we are. Come invest in our future. But there's a difference between a successful branding campaign and a successful city. Dubai had to figure that out the hard way. Many of their most ambitious projects remain partially empty, struggling to find purpose beyond spectacle. The Burj Khalifa is still struggling to fill up floors. The line feels like science fiction because it is science fiction. The promotional videos look like concept art for a movie about humanity's future. The language they use, like cognitive city, zero-gravity urbanism, civilizational revolution, sounds like it came from a sci-fi movie. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the line isn't meant to be fully real. Maybe it's meant to inspire, to provoke, to make us imagine different possibilities for how we live. There's value in that. Visionary projects push boundaries, challenge assumptions, force us to think bigger. Even if the line fails, maybe it plants seeds for ideas that work better in different contexts. But here's the problem. This isn't a thought experiment. This is real money, real land, real workers, real displaced communities, real environmental impact. When you move from imagination to implementation, you become accountable for consequences. The line has real costs that someone has to pay. Let me be clear, the line probably won't get built as designed. The full 170 kilometers, housing 9 million people, running on renewable energy, transforming Saudi Arabia into a global hub. That's not happening. What we'll probably see is a scaled-back version, maybe 10 or 20 kilometers, a luxury development for wealthy residents and tourists. And honestly, that might be the better outcome, because the full version of the line, if it could be built, if it could work as promised, would represent something troubling. Proof that top-down control, algorithmic management, and engineered perfection can replace organic human community. By the time 2026 comes to an end, we'll have answers. Either the line will show substantial progress, validating the vision and attracting more investment, or it will stall, become a cautionary tale. Join the long list of mega projects that promised the world and delivered a fraction. My bet, something in between. Enough gets built to save face, but not enough to fulfill the original promise. The 170-kilometer vision gets quietly revised. The 9 million residents becomes 1 million. And in 20 years, the line becomes a tourist curiosity. Cities are humanity's greatest invention. They're messy, chaotic, sometimes dysfunctional, always fascinating. The line wants to skip all of that. It wants perfection without process. And maybe that's the real problem, not the engineering challenges or the environmental impact or the construction costs. The real problem is that the line represents a fundamentally wrong idea about what cities are for. So when I say the line has a serious problem that could end everything, I don't just mean end the project. I mean end a way of thinking about urban life that's already under threat. The idea that cities belong to the people who live in them, not to the algorithms that manage them. The line isn't just about architecture or urban planning or Saudi Arabia's economic future. It's about what kind of world we want to live in, whether we value human messiness or algorithmic perfection, whether we trust ourselves to build our own communities or prefer to have them built for us. These are the questions the line forces us to ask. The future is being built right now in the Saudi desert, and what happens there will tell us something important about ourselves. So there you have it. Let us know what mega building you'd like us to cover next in the comments.